It's one thing to say, hey, I don't believe in the Gospels, I just believe in the Quran, and the Quran says that Jesus didn't die, so I believe that Jesus didn't die. That's one thing. It's something else entirely to say, according to the Gospels, Jesus didn't die. If you say, according to the Gospels, Jesus didn't die, then there are only two possibilities. You're either completely ignorant, you've never read them, so you don't know what they say, or you're deceptive. You have read them, but you're a compulsive liar. Zakir Naik tells his followers that according to the Gospels, Jesus didn't die. His favorite argument is the sign of Jonah from the Gospel of Matthew.
Further, it's mentioned in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter number 12, verse number 38. The Jews come up to Jesus, peace be upon him, and say, Master, Rabbi, meaning, O Lord, why don't you give us a sign? Sign meaning a miracle. What is the reply he gives? In the next verse, Gospel of Matthew, chapter number 12, verse number 39 and 40, he says, You evil and adulterous generation, seek it thee after a sign? You seek for a miracle? No sign shall be given to you but the sign of Jonah. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. The whale takes Jonah 3 days and 3 nights in the ocean, dead or alive? Alive. Fish vomits him out on the seashore. Was he dead or alive? Alive. Alive, 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 alive. When a person is thrown overboard in a raging sea, he ought to die. If he dies, no miracle. If he's alive, it's a miracle. Jesus said, peace be upon him, as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights. As Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the whale, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. Jonah was alive. For the prophecy to be fulfilled, he should be alive. As I proved in the earlier part of my talk, he was alive. Otherwise, Jesus, peace be upon him, will be a liar. Naus billah, which we cannot agree. We respect him, we revere him. So for him to fulfill the prophecy, he should be alive. And Jesus, peace be upon him, was alive, as I proved in the earlier part of my talk.
So Zakir Naik tells his followers that according to the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus never died. How do we know that Jesus didn't die in the Gospel of Matthew? Because of the sign of Jonah. Jesus said that his generation would be given the sign of Jonah, and Naik argues that Jesus was telling them that he wouldn't die. Naik's followers believe everything he tells them without question, so they agree that Jesus was saying he wasn't going to die, even though they've never read the Gospel of Matthew. But no one who's actually read the Gospel of Matthew would ever, in a million years, conclude that Jesus was somehow saying that he wasn't going to die. Why? Well, let's take a quick look at the Gospel of Matthew. This is Matthew 28, after Jesus' crucifixion and burial. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, and came and rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing white as snow. And for fear of him the guards trembled and became like dead men. But the angel said to the women, Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus, who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead, and behold, he is going before you to Galilee. There you will see him. See, I have told you. The angel says, He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Go quickly and tell his disciples that he has risen from the dead. As always, hard to rise from the dead if you haven't been dead. So, an angel just called Zakir Naik a total liar. But notice what the angel says to the women. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. According to the angel, who says that Jesus rose from the dead, Jesus also said that he would rise from the dead. The angel doesn't say, "Oh yes, Jesus told you he wouldn't die because the sign of Jonah." He says Jesus told them that he would rise from the dead. Muslims, who are you going to believe? Zakir Naik or an angel? So, where did Jesus say that he would rise from the dead? In a bunch of places in the Gospels, but let's look at what Jesus said in Matthew 16. Why am I going to Matthew 16? Because that's one of two places in the Gospel of Matthew where Jesus mentions the sign of Jonah. Jesus says in Matthew 16, verse 4, "An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it except the sign of Jonah." What does Jesus mean by the sign of Jonah? Well, I can tell you what he can't possibly mean by the sign of Jonah. He can't possibly mean something that would totally contradict the rest of what he says in Matthew 16. Matthew 16, same chapter, verses 21 to 23. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me. For you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." So, in Matthew 16, Jesus says that his generation would be given the sign of Jonah. Then, in the same chapter, he tells his followers that he's going to be killed and that he's going to rise from the dead. Peter gives the Zakir Naik interpretation and rebukes Jesus. Peter says, "This will never happen to you. You're the Messiah. You can't die." And how does Jesus respond to Peter and to Zakir Naik? He says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Context is fundamental to interpreting any text. And what we just read is an extreme example of the significance of context. As a rule, if you read a verse and you give that verse an interpretation, and yet, in the same chapter, the person whose words you're interpreting calls your interpretation satanic, you probably need a new interpretation. Now, if this were a speaker or an apologist for any other ideology in the world, and he were caught shamelessly twisting the words of Jesus and giving an interpretation that Jesus calls satanic and contradicting the clear claim of an angel, if this were a speaker or an apologist for any other ideology and he were caught doing this, he would be ridiculed into obscurity. He'd be shunned. He'd be humiliated. His own followers would say, "This guy is shamelessly lying to us and to everyone else. He can't represent us, or the entire world will think that we idolize liars." That's what would happen to a champion of any other ideology if he did this. But Zakir Naik knows his audience. He knows that his followers love it. I mean love it when he lies, especially when he lies about Jesus. Fortunately, as much damage as Zakir Naik has done to the minds of his followers, he's doing even more damage to his own religion because he's given us an endless supply of ammunition to expose him. Shall we take a closer look at the sign of Jonah to see why it proves that Zakir Naik is a compulsive liar?
It just backfired on me. It just backfired on me. This is a part of a religion. There's a reason to it. Yeah?